Good morning, Salt Church. How's everybody doing? Good. Glad everyone's here today. If this is your first time, thank you very much for coming. We're super excited to have you here and be able to have an opportunity to come worship with us and hear God's word. So, if this is, you've probably been following us for the last 3 or 4 weeks. We've been going over the book of Hebrews. Hebrews 11 is what we've been discussing. Hebrews 11 is a great chapter because it teaches us both about faith and about patience. Behind me, you will see here, these are like my Hall of Fame guys, the ones who are specifically drawn out here through the scriptures to tell us how they endured faith. And this writer is specifically telling us here through these prior verses, these are figures who exemplified faith in God. And we use a name such as Abel, he sacrificed by faith. Enoch, who had a walk of faith. Noah, who literally had his works of faith. Abraham, who was obedience of faith. And Sarah, who had a birth by faith. So you're probably wondering, well, why is the writer giving us these examples? Because faith is something that God says pleases him. In Hebrews chapter 11, verse 6, it says, it's impossible to please God without having faith. You have to. It's an essential part of who we are as Christians is to have faith in God through all seasons, whether it be good or bad. We have to have faith that God is faithful in every single thing that he says he is. Now you will notice here in verse 13, we'll read off here to you, those all died in faith, not having received the things promised. But yet they have seen and greeted from afar, having acknowledged that they were strangers and exiles on this earth. For people who speak, thus must make it clear that they are seeking a homeland. These verses tie together the reasons for including for these various stories in point that each of these people had faith that they look forward to despite having a clear view of the future. They chose to trust God and obey in Hebrews 11, 1 through 2. It is a choice and decision that you have to make to trust God. Because many of us, like myself, when my wife will have a bad day or something going on, she'll come and talk to me and be like, hey, Daniil, this and everything happened at work, and I'm Mr. Fix-It Felix. I like to take out my toolbox and start whacking away to see if I can figure it out. When God is trying to tell us to be patient and be still through the good and the bad, and that he has it all under control. In some cases, such as Abraham and Sarah, they didn't even live to see the promises fulfilled, yet their perspective was eternal rather than temporary. Let's be real with each other. How many of us truly and dearly look and say, God, I'm looking out for the eternal. When everything else in the world is going on around us, it's hard to look in front of us. Because think about it. We get up, we take our kids to school, we have to go to work, we have to be on time, we have to make sure food's on the table, that your kids will actually eat right and they won't throw it away. All right. But all that stuff's going on in our lives. So when do we really look at it and say, God, I'm doing this for the eternal. I'm not doing it for a temporal moment right now. I'm doing this for the larger picture. And let's be real, most of us here have read the Bible, and we know the outcome. We know that God says that he has prepared a place for us. But since we physically can't see it at times, we lose sight of it. I am 46 years old. I've got bad knees, a bad back. I'm looking forward to that new place, correct? Let's be real. I'm looking forward to the new body and all that good stuff he talks about. And as we look here and see, God made a promise to Abraham. He said in Genesis 17:7 that I will establish my covenant between me and you and your offspring throughout the generations for everlasting covenant to be God to you and to your offspring after you. So think about this. Abraham was made a promise by God. And was it in Abraham's time frame? Absolutely not. If you look at Abraham, he was 100 years old when this came to fruition. And Sarah was 90, and that's when God's promise began to come through. Think about that. It's impossible what happened, but God made it possible. How many of us have had situations where we look at things like, I don't see the out on this, but God comes through right on time? In the scriptures, it's showing us that all of these figures look forward to what God had in store. And it shows that they also had patience in letting God be in full control of the situation from start to finish. When Abraham left, he just literally had his family and he's out in the middle of nowhere. He's susceptible to thieves and robbers and all these other things, but he trusted God and said, I trust you through this situation. We have to have patience along with our faith so we can have endurance for the full race. It talks about here in 2 Corinthians 5:7, for we walk by faith and not by sight. How many of us here like to know what the ending is, right? We all do. Sometimes I've even gone to books that I've read the ending of the stories so I can kind of figure out, do I even want to waste my time reading this book if this ending's terrible, right? We know the ending. So why do we get so easily sidetracked off of what the end goal is? Because everything on that's going around us can very, very easily get us distracted. It also talks about in Psalms 27:14, wait for the Lord, be strong, and let your heart take courage. Wait for the Lord. It's telling us we have to be patient. I am one of those microwave guys. I like to hit 3 minutes, no, boom, it's done, I'm ready, and I'm out of there, right? But that's not always God's timing. It says in Proverbs 3:5-6, trust in the Lord with all thine heart and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him and he will make straight your paths. He's telling us it's not going to always make sense to you. Trust me. Trust me whether despite the circumstances, trust me. My word is true and everything I've said has been true. Why all of a sudden would I lead you astray now? Here the writer points out in the depths of the perspective for those who truly trust in God, life on earth is merely a temporary journey. Christian writers often refer to the idea that this life and this earth is not a real home. Instead, in the book of Hebrews indicates that we're strangers, we're exiles of this earth. How many of us just feel like you don't just fit in sometimes? You just don't fit in. We're not supposed to because this is not our permanent dwelling place. This is merely a temporary part of our lives that we're going to have. Once we pass and die on, God has said he's already prepared a place for us. We have to be obedient even in difficult and confusing commands as Noah did. In Hebrews 11:7 talks about Noah built this ark. And let's think about it. We've all heard that story. I mean, you're out in the middle of nowhere building this thing that you're probably wondering, well, people are walking around you and making fun of you and going, what am I doing? God is telling us to stay to the path of our faith, that God has got it all under control. And the easiest way I like to explain it, we all probably drove here, and everybody just drive on the freeway. You ever get a little sleepy and you start to go to the right too far and you start hitting those bumpers, boom, 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 right? God has the word for our bumpers to wake us up when we get too far over to the right or too far to the left. He's trying to wake us up and say, hey, I need your attention. The goal that we're looking at right now is right in front of us. We're looking at the bigger goal, the place that you prepared for us. So when we pass, this is just a temporary time we're here. When we can trust God to make good on his word, even when it seems as if he wants us we waited too long, as Abraham and Sarah. The promise is only as good as where the word comes from. God's word is true. We believe it with every amount of blood in our bodies. We should believe that his word is true and it comes to fruition. And what he says, just as it talks about in Isaiah, that there would be a lamb sacrifice and no bone would be broken. He kept his word. So why do we at times tend to get off track when things just don't go the way that we look to have them planned out. We have to trust God through all situations, in all circumstances, that he is in control, even when the timing doesn't match up with ours. God is a sure thing. When he says something, it comes through. Fix our eyes on what eternal and not what we can only see, but through faith we believe God's word. We are pilgrims headed on a journey to go home from this earthly home to a city that God, he has promised us. The earth is broken, and you should feel like you don't belong here, because we don't. God has placed us here in a foreign place. And let me ask you a question. Anybody ever had someone stay at their house too long? Right? You ever had somebody, you're like, you know what? The door's open, it's unlocked, and, it's time for you to... And have you ever tried to hint to someone, hey, it's time to go because you're tired too? You ever try to do that? That's how we should feel in this place, because this earth is contaminated. Sin is everywhere. It's rampant. It has made what God has made beautiful. It's contaminated it. And our ideas and our thoughts, and we begin to change to be just like others, and our priorities change when we forget that God is our priority and the world is a temporary place and not our permanent dwelling. God has prepared a place for us in a new home. Enduring faith sees and grows focused on the place that God has prepared for us. It talks about it in John 14:2, that he has prepared a place for us that has many rooms. If it wasn't true, he wouldn't have said it. Now, in verse 14, according to the writer, Hebrews says, and the writer of Hebrews, faith in God is a matter of trust. Do we truly and dearly trust God through all things? And I will tell you, there's been times when me and God, we've had some conversations. I've shut the door and I was like, hey, God, I don't know what you're doing, but can you hurry up? Because, I don't like this. This is no fun. Especially the time when my daughter was born, we were told that she was going to have some major medical difficulties. I went in the room and I talked to God and I said, hey, I don't know what you're doing, but you don't have to. We can do something else. And God was like, do you trust me? And everything came out the way it was supposed to be, but I didn't understand at the time, God, what are you doing? And I just remember back to these verses, God says, lean not on your own understanding. You need to lean on him through all seasons, whether they're good or they're bad. We have to understand God is in control. These prior verses were meant to explain on how that trust is, in a general sense, is reflected on our willingness to obey God despite not having a perfect understanding of his plans. Figures such as Noah and Abraham had to choose their obedience before they had a full understanding on how God would make good on his word. In some cases, such as Abraham and Sarah, they didn't even live out to see the completed fulfillment of these predictions. God told him he was going to be the father of many nations. He never even got a chance to even see it all lived out. But he fully trusted God that he would fulfill it. And yet they had faith in God because their faith was looking forward, understanding that God's ultimate purpose for them was eternal and not earthly. This point is emphasized through the next verse by noting that as figures such as Abraham were merely looking at the earthly home, they could have always gone back to where they started at, yet they chose not to. Abraham had that choice and option to go back to where it was easy. So where he didn't have to go and fulfill out what God wanted him to do, but he chose to stay because he trusted God. So those entrusting looking forward are said to be seeking a homeland instead of relying on the earth as its ultimate end. Saved believers can be confident that God's ability to work things for good extends into eternity. In short, faith in God includes a recognition that this life is not all that there is. Amen to that, correct? Trust me, that's the reason why I'm in the grind every day trying to read my Bible to make sure I don't lose track of what's important. In these next two verses, it talks about, in Hebrews 10:36, that for we have a need of endurance, so that we have done the will of God, that you may receive what is promised. Now, just so you know, I have my good friend here, Chris. He's a runner. I am not a runner. You can tell by the physique. I'm not a runner. But Chris was telling me, he's like, man, I run 10 miles. I don't do 10 miles in a week, okay? Let alone do in a day like this guy does. But running a race, it takes time and effort. You have to be willing to put in the time to be able to go 10 miles. My knees would give out. But a lot of people have probably tried to get into shape and your body doesn't want to cooperate, but it takes a period of time. And in our walk, we have to have faith that God's going to be faithful to complete everything that he said he's going to. That one of my favorite verses there is in Hebrews 11:6. It says, it is impossible to please God without faith. God tells us that should be a part of who you are, is our faith in knowing that God is going to fulfill every single thing he said he's going to do. Next, faith, like we talked about, does not always fall into your time frame, aligning with God's time frame. Trust and be patient for his plan, especially when it talks about sharing the gospel. So many times we want that person in our life to be saved. We were like, dude, you don't know what you're missing. And we want God, we're like, all right, God, like, hold on a second. Like, my buddy's not doing well. Like, he needs to hear your word. And we want them to be saved like that. I have a great example in my life. I have a friend of mine who used to work with me a while ago. We had talked to him about Jesus, never heard anything about it. 3 or 4 years later, all of a sudden, he comes back and he's in our lives and he got his life turned around for God. And it was amazing to see where he was at and to where he's at now. I'm glad God did the work he did in him while he was away from us and did what he needed to do. But to be honest with you, I didn't even really remember even the deep conversation I had with him until that day. He was like, yeah, dude, I remember you telling me about Jesus, and I'm saved now. And in my time frame, I would have wanted it to happen right then and there, because that's what I would wanted. But God had a plan for him, and our job being involved with that is to merely just share the gospel with this guy. And I couldn't see exactly what had happened until many years later, but it's the faith of sharing the gospel and the word and the Holy Spirit working in this young man's heart that we got a chance to see him get saved. Verse 15 says, if they had been thinking of the land at which they had gone of, they would have had an opportunity to return. But as it is, they desire a better country, that is a heavenly one. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared for them a city. Those who are truly biblically faith trust in God despite not knowing all the details. These prior verses describe many examples of this in perspective, including Abel and Noah and Abraham. These men obeyed God, though they could not see all the twists and turns ahead in their futures. Abraham particularly did not live to even see out the completed promises of God, and yet Abraham, like in other examples, would not limit to their earthly perspective. This part in Hebrews specifically tells us that men like Abraham were looking forward into something eternal. And I want you to honestly ask yourself this question. When's the last time you just thought about, this is a bigger picture than what's right in front of me? When's the last time you weren't worried about everything else that's going on in front of you and looking at the overall picture, like it talks about in the very last book in Revelations on how God has this perfect plan? And sometimes we forget that. We forget that God has this perfectly worked out for us. Now, this part of Hebrews specifically tells us this to remind us as believers, don't lose sight. This verse makes a common sense point to support the idea if men like Abraham were merely looking for this physical territory, they had every opportunity to go back, but they didn't. The reason for waiting faithfully was understanding that God's ultimate plan for them reached to eternity. Faith in God gives us heavenly, eternal perspective rather than just a limited physical one. This gives us confidence to hold fast despite temporary setbacks and hardships. Now, the easiest way I can try to explain this out is, anybody here have bulk day, like bulk trash day? You take all that stuff that you don't want and you throw it out to the curbside, right? How many of you go back in that trash after you throw it out to go back in there and redig for more stuff? God is telling us he's got a better place. So why would you want to go back to being your old self and your old person that you were instead of that new creation that God has made from Christ? He's telling us he's got a way better place for us, planned out and perfectly made. In Hebrews 16, it says here that Old Testament figures such as Abraham and Isaac remained faithful to God even though his promises didn't come true in their earthly lifetimes. Now, according to the writer of Hebrews, this is evident through the understanding that God's plan for us are ultimately eternal and not material. They're focused on not the temporals, so shall we be focused on our future with God. Be faithful in all circumstances. Despite the circumstances, be faithful to God. In this world, we are going to have people trying to sway us on our beliefs, that are going to try to get us off track of what the ultimate goal is, and that's Jesus. But if Jesus did not come to this earth and die and resurrect again, this conversation is nigh. It doesn't mean anything. But he fulfilled every single thing he said he was going to. So why should we falter away when times get rough? If these men had merely been looking for something eternal, they could have easily just turned back to where they were from, as I talked about, because they would have lost their faith in what God was doing. The fact is, they did not prove, they did not show here that show themselves as being citizens of heaven, strangers and exiles on this earth, and were willing to trust God's ability to bring about promises out of things unseen. Think about this. You're a 90-year-old woman getting ready to have a baby with your 100-year-old husband. It's impossible. But God made it possible even when the circumstances didn't make sense. So what makes you think God doesn't have that same plan for you when things just don't make sense? Get back to God's word, read, and get underneath his arms, his loving arms that wants the best for you despite your circumstances. Earlier verses referred to Abraham looking forward to a city that has a foundation whose designer and builder is God. That talks about in Hebrews 11:10. The Old Testament prophets such as Isaiah and Ezekiel recorded visions of this heavenly city. And the book of Revelation mentions this a multitude of times, that this is the real goal and the real purpose, and that our faith must be held up like Abraham's. Even though he was out in the middle of the desert, he even said, I had no idea where I was even going. He had faith that God was his guiding light to show him where he should be. And last week, I had someone come and stop me on the way out, and they said, Daniel, man, I've got a million things going on in my life, and my faith is shaken right now. What do I do? Get back to God's word. Read. Get close to him and ask God for clarity. Lord, show me your will, not my will, not the will that I figure is going to be best. What's your will for this? God is working on things that are for the good, not only here, but in heavenly places. It talks about it in Romans 8:28. What a great verse. That we know for those things, for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to his purpose. This writer sums up the word, therefore, that mere obedience is not enough for a person. A person must have faith in God in order to please him. Since these listed figures held that kind of trust in God, God was not ashamed of them. It was in their faith leading to obedience, not the actions themselves, which made them acceptable to God. So not only do we have to have faith, but we need to believe it with everything that flows in our body, that God, you have this under control. No matter how I look at it and no matter how someone else sees it, if it's the will of God, it may not make sense for all of us. It may not even have a full understanding, but we need to have faith in God through all circumstances. Now be patient in faith that God has it all worked out. Even when we can't see the end, God is always faithful to us, even when we cannot see the ultimate outcome. Now, I know there are people that are in this place right now that are going through things. And you're probably wondering, God, like, how are you going to fix this? Like, this mess that's been created over here, either in my family, my immediate family, a friend of mine, how do you have this all figured out? Lean on God through this time, just as Abraham did. He had no idea where he was going or how it was going to turn out, but he believed with everything in him that God had everything worked out, just as much as we all believe that Jesus Christ came and died on this cross for our sins. And look at, when he did that, was that the perfect plan in our eyes? No. But he had to make that sacrifice for all of us, for this place that he's prepared for us. Let us not lose focus on that. As I finish up today, if we could just bow our heads and pray. Lord God, what a great opportunity to be able to come to a place where we can come and worship you and to hear your word and to get our eyes focused back on you when this world seems so busy with a million things going on. Our faith needs to be firmly grounded into you and in everything we do. If you're here today and you have never had a true opportunity to hear the gospel, we are here over here right on this prayer sign. We would love to come and pray with you afterwards to definitely make sure that we can have those burdens that you've had being casted upon you, that you could share them with us and we could pray for you. We would love to have an opportunity to be able to even get to know you better and to make sure you know that you're not going through this life alone, that we will point you back to Jesus and what he's done for all of us and the ultimate sacrifice he made. We ask these things in your son's precious name, and everyone said, amen.